Well, it's been a while since part 1, so let's continue my criticisms of Kingdom Hearts 3. Now, something I think I forgot to mention is, well, summons in the game. And I'm gonna make this very clear, summons are pathetically unbalanced for this game. While summons in Kingdom Hearts 3 do eat up all of your MP and you have to have max MP to actually use them, the trade-off for using that isn't really that impactful, considering for starters, when you use them, you get your health healed up. Donald and Goofy or any other party member don't need to be alive for the summoning to initiate, and if they're knocked out, they'll just be healed right back up. So you'll literally get a free revive for everyone at the cost of your MP, just like Cure God. So what is really the point in using Cure God then? And most of the summons range from pathetically underpowered to ridiculously overpowered. Sima, for example, is probably the best summon in the game, to the point where I really just had to stop using summons altogether so I wouldn't just break the game entirely. Yes, KH2 did have some game breaker abilities, but even then, it took quite a while to get them. Final Form Fire Gust spam still took a while to get in the first place, since you had to, get Final Form and level Fire Gut up to Fire Gut, and the negative combo had to be unlocked through beating Sephiroth. Yeah, Sephiroth. But in KH3, the overpowered abilities are just handed out like candy. Overall, summons in KH2 were also pretty neat. They weren't overpowered and they assisted you in very different ways. Chicken Little, for example, was excellent for getting enemies grouped up so you can use Explosion in a much more consistent manner. Stitch, on the other hand, was also useful for keeping your status effects high by recovering your MP and also healing you on occasions. And he also helped stun enemies. Stitch in this game is pathetically underpowered, to the point where there's no real reason to use him in the first place. Now, getting back to the main story, Sora, Donald, and Goofy Deus Ex Machina their way to the Destiny Islands, because the writers just remembered that they had to actually finish KH3's story, and we cut to Riku and Mickey fighting another Heartless Tower, which for some reason, even though they're Keyblade masters, can't actually fight, and Mickey gets caught in the tower, and Aqua finally returns.
Mickey, you're too late.
What follows is a fight where you play as Riku again, where you fight the Heartless Tower again, until you use Sora to Deus Ex Machina his way into the Realm of Darkness, and kills the Demon Tower in an admittingly pretty awesome cutscene. What follows is sadly the best boss in the game, and sadly because at this point this is really one of the only few good fights in the actual game. Anti-Aqua. Since she has strong attacks, great speed, and has a functional revenge value system that punishes you if you keep hitting her, rather than just teleporting away and doing nothing there, she requires actual skill to actually beat, and she's tough, but challenging and fair. Let's of course use attraction flows to basically stun lock her in the most pathetic manner possible.
Yes! Go! Yes! Yes! Go! Go! Yes! Yes! Go!
Thankfully, at the very least, if you don't fire with attractions or summons, she's actually a really fun fight, and is probably the only highlight of the actual game. However, this fight has a major flaw. This fight doesn't even come close to working well within the story. For starters, Sora has no real connection to Aqua since Sora only met her once, and doesn't even remember her as we see later on in the story.
I'm happy to see that you haven't changed one bit.
Huh?
Sora, you probably don't remember.
Mickey, on the other hand, has teamed up with Aqua multiple times, helped her destroy the X-Blade, saved her when she was in the Realm of Darkness, teamed up with her again, and has felt guilty about having to leave her once more. Before you say, but Aqua already has Mickey's Keyblade, Mickey can simply summon it back, and Aqua can't summon hers from Sora. So fighting Aqua playing as Mickey is a far more fitting confrontation than having Sora be the one to fight her.
You don't know what true loneliness shouldn't have abandoned me. Wander the shadows endlessly. Shouldn't have abandoned me. Help me.
Second, Sora defeating Aqua actually undermines his supposed character arc where he has to regain his lost power, but having him defeat Aqua completely undermines this when Aqua is a full-fledged Keyblade master with years of experience under her belt and is now wielding the power of darkness. It makes Sora look more powerful than the actual Keyblade masters, which ends up leading into my final point. Sora being the one to defeat Aqua ends up making Riku and Mickey look like total incompetent idiots, since Riku and Mickey are supposed to be the actual Keyblade masters who have supposedly become superior to Sora, and this problem becomes even more prominent as the game goes on, because even after beating Aqua, the other characters seem to keep making fun of Sora for not being a Keyblade master, when ironically he has gotten done when Riku and Mickey in 90% of the game have completely failed to fight Aqua and save her, when Sora pretty much did that within a few minutes.
But Sora needs work.
Yeah, rub it in. Rico! Mickey!
And this problem becomes even more prominent as the game goes on. After Sora saves Aqua and brings her to the Realm of Light, Sora and Aqua head to Castle Oblivion to wake Ventus up. Once they manage to reunite with Ventus, Aqua tries to wake him up, but Vanitas shows up and we get to play as Aqua to fight him, and while doing so, ends up unintentionally summing up the problems with making other characters do this much damage. It makes every single fight pathetically easy and lose any semblance of challenge. To address the argument that Aqua is far stronger than Vanitas and that's why he should be easy, why don't I tell you about a game called Devil May Cry? Because Dante in that game can easily trump any of his opponents aside from maybe the final bosses. In the actual gameplay, it is incredibly tough to beat these bosses and you have to use your own skill to beat them. Gameplay wise, it's up to the player to make Dante look like the badass he is in the cutscenes, and this works well because it keeps the gameplay fun and engaging while still making the protagonist be powerful in the story. And before you say, but Devil May Cry isn't like Kingdom Hearts, well, I'm going to make this very clear to you. To quote the gaming Brit,
they're just action games with really good combat.
So really, wouldn't it have been more fun if Aqua was kept at Sora's level in order to balance the gameplay of the former and keep the gameplay fun and engaging? Otherwise, it just reduces the fight to mindless Keyblade smacking. Vanitas himself honestly doesn't feel nearly as annoying and unfair as he was in Birth by Sleep, but in here, he's pathetically easy with no real challenge to kicking his ass, so the game just ends up becoming sleep-inducing by this point. After depleting his health, Vanitas manages to one-shot Aqua and once again call into question the legitimacy of Aqua being a Keyblade master, and after that, Sora desperately tries to figure out how to use the power of waking in order to revive Ventus, and in just a few sentences, Ventus manages to undermine the whole point of Sora's journey and make all the Disney worlds we explored feel even more pointless than ever thought possible.
The power of waking. I can't. I still don't have it yet. You never lost it. It sleeps. Until someone needs it. Call to it.
After this, Sora revives Ventus and Ventus wakes up and saves Aqua, but honestly speaking, this moment should have felt more impactful. Ventus and Sora meeting for the first time ever. Ventus is the reason why Sora can wield the Keyblade. Sora is the reason why Ventus survived his heart being damaged back in Birth by Sleep. This should have felt like two legends meeting each other for the first time ever. And not only that, Ventus's return doesn't really have any consequences for Sora's powers, since Sora's Keyblade by extension belongs to Ventus, and logically, when Ventus summons his Keyblade, Sora should have lost his. Yes, it would have been repeating a plot element from KH1, but at least it would have added some more tension given that the main character loses his power that in retrospect never really belonged to him, leading to the Guardians of Light gaining another one to their roster, but at the cost of another. But I will be going to this more in the next part of the series, so that's for another time. Now that the Guardians of Light have managed to assemble their 7 lights, we see Vex and Demix have managed to defect from the organization and have rescued Ansem the Wise, who in turn manages to create a replica in order to bring back Roxas. Speaking of Roxas, throughout the game there's a subplot about bringing Roxas back, but honestly, to really describe why this part of the plot fails, we'll have to go into detail later, where the subplot reaches its conclusion. So the Guardians of Light rest for one more day until the Keyblade War, and we get to see the protagonists interact with each other, and it's actually pretty good to watch. Until we get to the Destiny Islands trio, where we see Riku make peace with the Riku replica, which is a fine scene in and of itself, but the real problem of this scene comes when Sora and Kairi share the papyrus fruit, or the papyrus fruit, the paper fruit, the star fruit basically.
Let's let him be.
Here.
What? Huh?
For those of you who don't know, the star fruit is basically a sign of love and companionship to the one who is given the fruit. Now, look. Sora and Kairi sharing that fruit is something I've always wanted to see, but not when it has no build-up to it and interaction between the two. I know that Sokai's always been hinted at even back in KH1, but just because it's hinted at and built up in those games doesn't mean it works well when the moments they admit their feelings for each other happens in a narrative that has them barely interact with each other. In fact, this is the only time they interacted with each other before the Keyblade Graveyard. No joke, this is actually the first time they actually speak to each other one-on-one in the entire game. And it's by having Kairi doing absolutely nothing noteworthy throughout 90% of the game, we barely grow a connection to her and want to see her get together with Sora. Honestly, I feel that if they were gonna have a scene like this happen, they should have had Kairi be a part of the main party throughout the entire game, since we would get to know her better, see how she interacts with Sora, and develop her friendship with him to this point, and develop her own character to take her in a very interesting development. Otherwise, it feels like a scene put in just because it's a scene everyone has wanted to see. It's a reversal of the biggest issue with Pokemon. Pokemon focuses on the journey of the heroes, but suffers from a lack of a plan on how to craft its actual ending. There is no end point for the series. KH3 suffers from having no journey to the ending of its biggest plot points, and this only becomes more prevalent when we get to the Keyblade Graveyard. When our protagonists reach the Keyblade Graveyard, they end up being attacked by legions of Heartless, unversed, and nobodies in a sort of repeat of the 1000 Heartless fight in KH2, but unlike that game, it doesn't even manage to top how epic that fight was, since for stars, most of the Heartless in this fight are just JPEG images, whereas in KH2, you really did fight 1000 Heartless. Every last one of them. KH3 also forces you to use the boring attraction flow to beat the fight, in the only other time you use the roller coaster mode, and while you did use reaction commands in KH2 throughout the entire fight, they at least felt exciting to use, unlike KH3's attraction flow. I mean, we're just diving through enemies over and over and over, picking up Heartless to shoot laser beams all over the battlefield and wipe out legions of Heartless. What does KH3 have? Oh yeah, using a roller coaster to blast a few Heartless from far away. Real satisfying. I'm not going to act like reaction commands were the paramount virtue of game design, but at the very least they felt more fun to use than attraction flows in the game. The team manages to go forth and find Terra, leading to Aqua and Ven trying to talk to him, but Terra reveals himself to still be possessed by Xehanort, leading to a fight. And by fight, I mean having the Guardians of Light do nothing and just stand there doing nothing. Instead, we have a scene where the protagonists choose to do nothing and be the biggest incompetent idiots of all time, rather than just fight the baddie as a team and curb stomp his ass. Predictably, since they're doing nothing, Xehanort kicks their asses, even though they outnumber him 9-1, and Aqua managed to kick his ass before, and Riku and Mickey are full-fledged Keyblade masters, and Sora just beat the crap out of darkness-empowered Aqua, who, just to keep in mind, Aqua also beat Xehanort back in Birth by Sleep. And it's before you say that Aqua just lost most of her power because she was in the realm of darkness. First off, that's never stated in the actual game itself, so that goes out the window. Second, she didn't seem to lose much power when we were actually playing as her at 0.2, She wasn't knocked back to level 1 like Sora and the other characters, she was still at level 50. The game never mentioned this as an outcome of being in the realm of darkness. And just so you know, I can buy the fact that Ventus can't actually beat Xehanort, but I certainly don't believe that he would go down as pathetically as he does here.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I can buy the fact that Kairi can't really fight Xehanort on her own, but she just stands there doing nothing. Literally like an idiot, until Donald and Goofy, the characters who spend 76% of the game being knocked out, grow a few brain cells and actually manage to stop Xehanort through Donald using a Dragon Ball Z laser beam, which admittedly is pretty awesome.
Donald, no!
We're not free!
But doesn't really save the worst cutscene in the entire series, to be honest. Suddenly, a Heartless Tornado shows up, the Guardians of Light continue to do nothing like idiots, and everyone gets killed, aside from Sora and Riku, leading to Sora freaking out. There's so many reasons why this doesn't work at this point in the story. For starters, there's no build up to when this happens, so Sora's freak out just feels out of nowhere and it's way too fast for it to truly settle in. Second, the way everyone dies doesn't feel tragic or heartbreaking at all, since the way they were defeated by Xehanort is ridiculous and they should easily be able to handle just one of the 13 darknesses, especially since Aqua beat him back in Birth by Sleep, and later on in the Keyblade graveyard, Sora, Ventus, and Aqua managed to kick Xehanort's ass. And in the so-called Remind DLC, Aqua and Ventus will still beat Xehanort, when he's also being assisted by Vanitas. So the entire logic behind Xehanort beating everyone makes even less sense when we actually go into detail about it. Worst of all, by having the heroes reach their lowest point here, it prevents a scene like this from actually happening when the Guardians of Light should reach their lowest point, which is when Master Xehanort unlocks Kingdom Hearts. That should have been their most dire hour. But when it actually happens, it doesn't actually have the feeling of despair that it should have had. It just feels like, oh, he unlocked Kingdom Hearts. Well, we better go stop him anyways. There's no tension when that happens, because ultimately, they've already done a scene like that, and doing it again would just be repetitive. So this scene ends up actually undermining a future scene later on in the story. So Sora and Riku get killed by the Heartless Tornado, and the former wakes up in the afterlife and revives everyone after a few fights and somehow resets time before. Yes, it's absolutely confusing, especially since when they see Xehanort again, everyone does the exact same thing, except now the Lingering Will shows up to fight Xehanort, and we don't even get to play as Lingering Will, or see him interact with Aqua, Ven, or Riku, or actually see the results of his fight with Xehanort. Nope, this is the only cutscene he actually appears in. He just disappears from the entire game altogether. This is how he goes out. This is what happens when you build up 10 freaking years of this guy who's been pissed off, had all his rage built up to this moment, and he just disappears, and we don't even get to play as him and unleash his rage?
You gotta be shitting me!
Oh man, this becomes even more noticeable as the game goes on. We then proceed to fight the Heartless Tornado again!
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
And then we get probably the most memorable moment in the entire game, and I will admit, it's actually pretty awesome to see Sora using the Keyblades of all the players of Kingdom Hearts X to take down the Heartless Tornado, so props to them for making that look cool. After defeating it, Master Xehanort shows up and creates a maze for the Guardians of Light to fight in, and it's through the final hours of the game here that the problems of the game reach up to the surface. From that point on, you play as Sora only going through the maze and helping the other Guardians of Light. Now, Sora teaming up with King Mickey in order to battle Marluxia, Larxia, and Luxord is a fight I can definitely get behind, since we get to see Sora and Mickey fighting alongside each other, when it's something we sadly haven't really gotten to see much in the entire series, aside from a quick fight back in KH2. but after that, it quickly falls apart when we meet up with Riku fighting Xigbar, Ansem, and the Riku replica. But rather than play as Riku, who has a more thematic connection to at least the Riku replica, we instead continue to play as Sora, but this is particularly stupid since Riku was playable hours ago, so it's not like they lacked the assets to make him playable again for this fight. In fact, this will be one of the fights that will be changed in the Remind DLC, but we'll touch on that a bit later. The next duo of fights I feel show the biggest problem of the fights. From this point, Sora goes out to help Aqua and Ventus against Xehanort and Vanitas, and I can say without a doubt that this is absolutely the one fight Sora should have absolutely never had any part in this. This is so clearly a fight where you should be playing as Aqua, since she is the one trying to save Terra from Xehanort's influences, and we also played as Aqua hours ago. Sora also barely has any thematic connections to this fight, with him sharing the same face as Vanitas being the only thing that makes him relevant in this fight. If they were really gonna make any of the Destiny trio playable in this fight, would it really have been that bad to just make Riku the character you play as at the very least, so it would be more fitting of a fight? We fight Xehanort and Vanitas in a depressingly easy fight since Aqua and Ventus' damage output is busted to hell. I mean, just look at this. The fact that Aqua and Ventus do this much damage makes the fights far too easy even on Proud Mode. I literally had to restrict my level to the 30s just to make it a bit more fair, so Sora's damage output isn't quite as busted as these two. After defeating Xehanort and Vanitas, Aqua and Ventus try to help free Terra, but then he decides to start acting like a child.
You have no power over me! Stop, Terra!
Suddenly, the Heartless Guardian saves Aqua and Ventus, and reveals himself to be Terra trapped in this form.
One day, I will set this right. I will return to this land and protect my friends.
Sora then restores Terra to normal, and in doing so completely negates Aqua's journey throughout the series and goes to help the others.
Aqua and Ventus need rest. Terra, look after them.
Sora then finds Axel and Kairi and teams up with them to fight Sayax and a mysterious hooded figure, and I will admit, it is cool to see Sora and Kairi fight alongside each other like a battle couple. For about 30 seconds till she gets kicked out and kidnapped again. Then Zeniths shows up and breaks Axel's Keyblade and forces Sora and Kairi back, and Zeniths asks Axel for some final words.
What final words do you have for your superior?
Well, let me think about it. We've managed to avoid drowning.
The hooded figure that was in the fight, after being talked down from killing Axel by Sora, reveals herself to be Xion. And yes, I know that replicas were the reason why the organization could return, but Xion's return still comes out of nowhere, only to lead into...
Hands off my friends.
It cannot be.
Roxas! My turn.
Now, look, Roxas returning is something I've always wanted to see, but the way it's done here, it just doesn't feel satisfying at all. Roxas is brought back so late in the game that he barely gets to do anything aside from participate in one fight. It has no impact on the characters aside from Axel and Xion, but in a story like this, there should be major ramifications for a character as iconic to the series as Roxas coming back to the fight. Not only that, but Roxas' return ends up undermining Axel's chance to participate in the final battle and ends up making him lose any point to being here. Sayax himself, while he certainly was an asshole to Roxas and Xion, they already beat the crap out of him back in 350 over 2 days. That whole plot point got resolved in that game. Axel vs Sayax, on the other hand, has been a built-up moment ever since 350 over 2 days, where they had a conflict over the former's friendship with Roxas and Xion, to KH2 having Saïx mortally wounding Axel, leading to the latter's sacrifice, to Dream Drop Distance where Axel finds out that Saïx is possessed by Xehanort, and it's even built up within KH3 itself.
I realized I could be stronger.
Well then, you blew it. Wise up already and just quit.
Face it, Roxas is just like our other friend. Gone forever. You need to accept that.
You wish. I'm getting her back. All of them. Especially Roxas. I'm even dragging you home.
Always told you they'd stop you from crying. The upside-down tears.
Would you get lost? I'll clobber you tomorrow.
I expect no less.
Roxas' return doesn't even make sense within the lore of Kingdom Hearts. Roxas is Sora's nobody, and nobodies, not those, are created when a being loses their heart. And yes, I know that Ansem and Xemnas have returned, but only because of time travel. Roxas doesn't use time travel, but uses a replica's body to return. But it doesn't happen through Sora giving into the darkness, even though it's also foreshadowed by Xemnas and Ansem early in the game.
Still so blind. A nobody is what's left behind when one gives his heart to darkness. There is only one way to bring Roxas back, which is for you to give your heart up as well. Sora, have you finally decided to call upon the darkness?
What?
Go on then. The shadows are never out of reach.
It doesn't help either that Kairi gets kidnapped by Xemnas, which we'll get into a bit later. The fight against Saïx isn't even that fun since you play as Sora with Roxas and Xion as party members, but the both of them are extremely broken, especially Roxas since he's invincible and is also at level 99. Entire videos have been made with players just letting Roxas doing all the work. And it's at this point where I can explain the game's biggest problems at this point. There's a lack of perspectives to explore, and by that I mean a lack of playable characters. All these characters, aside from Mickey, are fighting against some of their more personal enemies, but instead of playing as them and settling the conflicts that were built up throughout the series, we stay stuck with Sora even though most of the enemies in this stage have better set up battles with other characters that aren't Sora. After letting Roxas beat the boss for us, Sora finds Riku and King Mickey, where they finally get to Master Xehanort, who sends out Xemnas, Ansem, and young Xehanort to battle our heroes, and now I think it's time to discuss one of the biggest changes to the formula that happens in this part of the game: group fights. Throughout this boss rush, members of the organization team up to fight our heroes, but even here, there's so many problems with this setup. For starters, your party members aside from Riku, because he's a brain-dead idiot, had their damage output busted to hell, and they're very difficult to get knocked out unless you're Riku. And as such, most fights become cakewalks, making them feel less like you're conquering your enemies with all the skills you learned throughout the entire game, and it's more as if you're just letting the AI do the work for you, especially in the Saïx fight, which, by the way, might as well just be called a timed mission, because I can literally beat the fight without doing nothing until Roxas gets Saïx back to 1 HP. Another big problem results from fighting multiple bosses at once. Rarely has KH ever relied on group fights, and there was a very good reason for that. The group fights in KH3 on critical mode, where your party members die more easily, end up having you get torn to confetti when your enemies gang up on you, since they can attack you off screen. Now, to get into detail on why this doesn't work, let's take a look at Devil May Cry again, that has a mechanic based around these types of boss fights. Devil May Cry has always had a sort of cheat to fighting multiple enemies, which has enemies only be able to attack if they're on camera. This is to prevent the combat from getting unnecessarily difficult with its combat, as it would lead to just players getting attacked by enemies over and over and over with no rhyme and reason. And it's even applied to boss battles with multiple enemies. KH3 on the other hand doesn't have a system like this in place for group battles. And since your party members die easily on critical mode, you'll just get hit over and over by bosses with no rhyme or reason. It's why in KH2 and even the spin-off games never featured group boss fights in order to make it fair one-on-one boss fights or boss fights that had you use your party members, but the party members in previous games were more balanced than the ones you have at the Keyblade graveyard aside from Kairi. Honestly though, the worst part about these fights is that as you dwindle the organization's numbers, They don't really get that many attacks, if at all, to counteract their smaller numbers, and the ones that they do get are pathetically easy to avoid or dodge. I mean, just watch.
Stop playing!
Yeah. What's the matter? See ya!
It's time to finish him!
This is for you!
I'll give the Nord's Court fight some credit for being one of the better parts of the boss rush, since it's the only one of the boss fights that actually uses group battles very effectively, since only one of them can actually attack you at once, until Master Xehanort pushes Mickey and Riku out of the arena and puts you into a sort of pattern attack that you have to dodge, which is actually pretty fun to dodge. And that is when you're able to actually use your skills to their fullest potential. It's honestly the highlight of the Keyblade Graveyard boss rush. After each Nort is defeated and gets their well done final moments, we see Master Xehanort showing a kidnapped Kairi to our heroes, and then he...
Kairi! Why her? Why?
Man, there's so many problems with this scene I don't even know where to begin. But getting the obvious ones out of the way, Sora and Riku's reactions to Kairi's death are extremely awkward. I mean, think about this for a moment. Kairi has been their friend since they were kids, and the both of them have harbored feelings towards her that even played a role in the conflicts of the first Kingdom Hearts game for the two fighting each other. In the case of Sora, both him and Kairi just confessed their feelings to each other, and yet Sora barely seems to sound that angry compared to what he sounds like previously.
Kairi! Why her? Why?
I have done it.
Xehanort!
The acting in this scene is just underwhelming. Kairi's death also prevents a team-up that everyone has wanted to see since Kairi got a Keyblade. Sora, Riku, and Kairi. But perhaps the biggest of all is the fact that we barely get to see Kairi throughout the entire game. If she spent the entire game with us, then it would have felt more painful since we would feel the impact of her being gone from the party. After Mickey attacks Xehanort, the latter, after nearly 20 years, recreates the X-Blade and unlocks Kingdom Hearts. And it could possibly be any more underwhelming. I mean, this is the main villain finally achieving his life's goal, and he doesn't even seem to be all that excited with the way his lines are delivered.
The Keyblade is complete. Kingdom Hearts, I call upon your true form.
After he unlocks Kingdom Hearts, the other Guardians of Light show up.
You? Worried?
Guys! Sorry we took so long. Had a couple of plot points that needed ironing out.
Riku and Mickey show up to explain their last plan to defeat Xehanort for good, but it honestly comes out of nowhere just to make it possible for our heroes to defeat Xehanort. It becomes even more disappointing when it leads to every character other than Sora, Donald, and Goofy getting sidelined for the final fight. Now granted, Donald and Goofy being a part of the final fight isn't necessarily my issue. My problem is that every other character that isn't them, even Riku of all characters, gets sidelined for the final fight. There isn't any big charge to face Xehanort once and for all. Nothing epic like charging in one final time to face Xehanort once and for all and end this charade for good. And as such, it makes these characters feel they have less of a reason to be there, even though it's explained that they have to keep Kingdom Hearts closed. After Sora, Donald, and Goofy head to the portal to fight Xehanort, they end up in Scala ad Kylum and head into the city where they face off against a bunch of Xehanort clones for some reason, and they finally face off against Xehanort in one of the only few good final bosses of the game. It does feel like a test of your skills with blocking, dodging, attacking, air dashing. It's honestly a genuinely fun fight to go through. What follows is the final fight with Xehanort, which is also pretty fun, but honestly speaking, there's nothing particularly impressive about Xehanort in the final fight, since all he really does is shoot some lasers, summon some clones, teleport spam, and warp gravity. But honestly, Ansem and Xemnas did that plus more. Ansem created an entire battleship and a world from pure darkness, and Xemnas also fused with Kingdom Hearts and proceeded to warp an entire world into a weapon to use against the heroes, and then fired millions of lasers down on Sora and Riku along with the ability to teleport. The only thing that stands out in this final fight with Xehanort is that when he temporarily absorbs Sora's light and forces you to fight in rage form for a bit. But it honestly isn't that impressive, unlike KH2 where in Xemnas' final boss fight, he at one point grabs Sora and starts electrocuting him, and then you get to play as Riku of all characters for a few minutes, as you get to blast Xemnas' clone to get to Sora and save him. It was an honestly amazing part of the fight that was really cool to see, since it made Riku feel like he was actually part of the final fight, which also leads into another problem, that Donald and Goofy barely feel like they're actually in the fight. They just feel like they're stand-ins just because they want to have Sora, Donald, and Goofy for the final fight.
It ends here and now.
After Xehanort is defeated, he laments his failures and explains his reasons for doing so while completely contradicting everything we know about him beforehand, even in KH3 itself.
The light, the symbol of the world's hope, was devoured by shadow. leaving nothing but ruin and utter failure. But the first light, the light of Kingdom Hearts, it can give us a new start. An empty world, pure and bright.
Why do you seek the Keyblade? Would you blanket all the worlds in darkness? Reduce them to nothing?
But darkness did cover the world once, in legend. We know so little about the Keyblade War. Only that it was just the beginning. Amidst that crisis, a precious light was found. It is a curious tale, and one worth exploring. They say ruin brings about creation. So what then would another Keyblade War bring? When the darkness falls, will we be found worthy of the precious light the legend speaks of? I must have these answers. The Keyblade needs to be forged, and with it the door to the Keyblade War unlocked.
Fool, you would risk an apocalypse out of sheer curiosity?
But perhaps the worst part is how Xehanort dies in the end. All the Guardians of Light show up and Master Ericus appears to talk down Xehanort, which leads to the latter just turning good. Yep, 20 years of this piece of shit causing misery on our favorite characters, and he just gets to move on to the afterlife with no problems. Just to keep this in mind, this is what Xehanort has done up to this point throughout the entire series.
Tell me the amnesia was just a sick joke. Boy, this is some cliche.
No. Gio. Who else will I have ice cream with?
Shitting me.
All that, and he basically gets the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. Honestly, Xehanort in KH3 single-handedly ruins this character for so many reasons. For starters, Xehanort has barely appeared throughout the game until the very end, and it's not only that, but he barely has a chance to talk to Sora, and his interactions with him feel generic.
It's all over, Xehanort!
You could easily replace Sora with any character and the scene would probably be just the same. Not only that, but no offense to the actor, but his voice is really just a downgrade. I know that Leonard Nimoy passed away, and no offense to the new actor who sadly passed away, but I think he's honestly just the wrong choice. I mean, look at how he delivers some of his lines.
Come, Kingdom Hearts! Ah, the Keyblade is complete. Kingdom Hearts. I call upon your true form. Open now and show me the world to come. What?
So Xehanort redeems himself and allows the other characters to close Kingdom Hearts and doesn't even try to revive Kairi for what he did. And Sora goes to revive Kairi, which we don't get to see for some reason. And when he returns to the Destiny Islands with her, he ends up not feeling so good and disappears even though we know he's going to return in the next game. Oh, and Xigbar was the mastermind behind everything. Now, going to the post-game content, there's absolutely nothing fun to do out there aside from the battle portals, but honestly, they're just watered-down versions of KH2's Olympus Coliseum tournaments. And by the way, that was in the vanilla version of KH2. If we even dare bring up FM, it completely smashes KH3 into the curb, spits on its grave, then pisses on it, shits on it, and then lights it on fire and blows it up with an Ultima cannon. And that was KH3, and look, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this video, but I want you to understand, the people who dislike the video, that my anger towards KH3 doesn't really come from a place of malice. I wanted this game to be the best it can be, but I honestly don't like it. I really wish it was the best it could have been, and that's why I made this video. Because I want KH3 to be the best it can be, because I expect better from Kingdom Hearts. The game's too unbalanced for combat, in both difficulty and easiness, and the story is utterly disappointing considering that it wastes most of its characters and does nothing with the main villain until the final act. Now, referring to the Remind DLC that's planned for winter, I will admit that it will somewhat alleviate Riku, Roxas, Lee, Xion, and Aqua's roles in the story. I don't see that as a reason to celebrate on Square Enix though for giving us contents that should have been in the base game. I mean, this is just Final Fantasy XV all over again. So what if you added content that was supposed to be in the base game anyways? And I remember, at least in an interview, as far as my memory goes, that Nomura did state that he originally wanted to make the other characters playable, but unfortunately it was cut out. Given that Remind DLC is going to be $20, I have no doubt who played a role in changing Nomura's plans. What's even sadder is that every single KH game has always had something that I loved about it. KH1 basically started the franchise with some pretty good combat mechanics to match it, making it an unforgettable journey. Chain of Memories helped establish the organization, fleshed out Sora's character, and made Riku one of my favorite characters in the series. 350 Over 2 Days gave Roxas, my personal favorite character, an expanded backstory and introduced Xion, another one of my favorite characters, into the series, and gave us one of the most heartbreaking and well-written stories out of all the Kingdom Hearts games. KH2 brought us an amazing combat system that helped introduce the next generation that were too young to play other action games like Devil May Cry, while still being one of the best combat systems of any action game to date, and ended the story that KH1 set up in a satisfying, if bittersweet manner, while still leaving the story open for continuation. Birth by Sleep gave us more context to Kingdom Hearts 1, expanded the lore of the franchise, gave 3 new interesting characters to play as, and gave us context on the main villain of the series. Dream Drop Distance gave one of the most satisfying resolutions to Riku's character arc, and set the stage for KH3. 0.2 gave context to where Aqua and Mickey were during the events of KH1, and basically continued to set the stage for KH3. KH3 just offers a disappointing resolution to our favorite characters, and gives us a very unsatisfying combat system to date. Now, to end this problem retrospective of KH3 on a bittersweet note, my next videos will be based around how I would have fixed KH3's story and gameplay in order to maybe give a clearer picture of what I wish this game could have been like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoy the video, like, comment, subscribe, and retweet if you must. Really helps my channel out in the end. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Also, the music is absolutely amazing. God bless you, Yoko Shimomura.